Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm Daniel Torres. If this is the first time you tune in, you'll want to know that this is the show that gives visibility to the top voices in consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond. I'm accompanied by no other than Efrain Rosario, my dear co-host. How are you, Efrain?
Good, Daniel. Nice to be with you as always.
I know we hadn't recorded together for a while. So
No, we've. I think last time you and I were together was in person, actually at an event in London. But yeah, we haven't recorded in quite a while.
We went to the Retail Media Summit, and it was interesting because we both recorded podcasts, but we did so separately, which is the first for us as well.
Exactly, not together. So this is our reunion tour.
Exactly, always good to have a reunion, and especially in such a big week as this one, where we're celebrating a new milestone for us, 18,000 LinkedIn followers, already a small city, I think, no?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing to think how far and how quickly it's come in the short time that you and I have been doing this. So definitely thanks to everyone out there for their support and continuing to listen in.
Yeah, and it coincidentally, we've reached 18,000 followers at the same time that we've reached 200 episodes, which is maybe equally mind-blowing. No, I don't know how we've convinced so many people.
I think that is the power of persuasion. But I will say that I think you and I are 200 episodes smarter than we were when we started this 2+ years ago.
Yeah, totally. No, it's good because I think that if whoever's listening wants to go back to a website or your favorite podcast player, and you can find like so many interesting people, and we have a search bar on the website where you can find, you look for marketing or retail media or e-commerce or I don't know, CEO.
Just general leadership as well. I mean, I think if you just want to hear like great insight from senior leaders on how they've been successful in their own careers, have a listen. We've got some great episodes, particularly early on as well.
Yeah, totally. And actually, there's a smart way you can find people as well if you're interested in a specific topic, which is to send Efrain, myself, or Christina a LinkedIn message or an email, and we'll be happy to recommend you an episode, especially for your needs. And by the way, Efrain, I don't know if you noticed, there's actually a third milestone this week as well. I don't know if you saw.
No, tell me, what is it?
So our sister podcast at the other side of the Atlantic, the CPG Guys, have reached 34,000 followers this week.
Wow. It's amazing. Congrats to Peter and Shri.
Yeah. A lot of things happening as we go into the new year.
I was going to say, it's only fitting, Daniel, that we're having all these reasons to celebrate as we go into the festive season.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, I think it's been like such a great, since we came back from the summer, we've had Candid Commerce, which was a huge success in Amsterdam. And we're going to have a new Candid Commerce, probably by the time that this airs, announced in London in Q1. So do reach out if you're interested in participating in that. I think that, RMS UK and just our footprint is getting bigger and bigger, which is great, because I think it's not a testament to us, it's more a testament of the great guests that we have had, really.
Absolutely. And an added bonus is that if you come to Candid Commerce, you get to get your picture with Daniel.
Exactly. That's that's like a kind of like a privilege and an obligation. So take it as you will. But I think one great thing that we have the opportunity to ride the wave here is like the way that the industry is changing. No, I mean, I think that if you think of it, Efrain, when we started in 2022, I think things have changed quite a bit. No, well, how do you see it?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think if you think about the wave of volatility that we've been riding in those 2+ years, and how we've seen some fairly seismic changes in the industry as well in regards to certain things that have kind of come up and then started to stabilize, but then you're just seeing things that are taking off. It's unreal.
Totally. So what's better than have somebody from the Digital Advertising and Marketing Industry Association in Europe, the IAB? That's our guest today. It's no other than their Industry Development and Insights Director, Marie-Clare Puffett. Hi, Marie-Clare. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Efrain. I'm good, thank you. How are you both doing?
We're good. And thank you for joining us and for listening us, giving us the time to do a little bit of celebration before we jumped in.
No worries. It's nice to hear about all of the great milestones of this podcast. It's one I've admired for a while, and I'm very excited to be here with both of you.
Fantastic. Maybe we should have prepared and asked you, like, what was your favorite episode that you've listened to on the FMCG guys?
Yeah, you've probably put me on the spot there.
You can get back to us on that one.
I'll get back to you for sure.
So Marie-Clare, tell us about the IAB, because it's a name that I've seen out there actually when I look at how my podcast is ranking and how many downloads I'm getting through my podcast platform. The IAB rankings are like the standard ones, but I know that you're also connecting retailers and brands, so you're everywhere. What are you?
What are we? It's a great question. So I think the best way to describe us is we are an industry association for digital marketing and advertising, for the digital advertising and marketing ecosystem. So essentially, we bring together different companies within the ecosystem. So that's technology companies, it's advertisers, it's marketing companies, it's retailers, most recently publishers, media owners, media networks, etc. And our kind of core mission really is to lead political representation and promote industry collaboration. So we do a lot of kind of policy advocacy and lobbying work with our team in Brussels, with the EU institutions, and that's really the backbone of our organisation. But then we do a lot of industry development, industry collaboration work to set up things like industry frameworks, standards, educational programs, insights, etc., that really help the market, the ecosystem to thrive and to grow.
Marie-Clare, I think, as I mentioned to you as we were, getting into this episode, IAB is an organization that I'm becoming more and more familiar with over time. But I'm curious, for those in our audience who are new to IAB, how and why have companies partnered with you across some of the different initiatives that you just mentioned?
So we are a membership organisation. So generally we work with companies that are members of ours. So we are slightly unique and different to other IABs. So in that we have both, obviously we're a pan-European organisation as IAB Europe. We have both national IABs and federations as members, and also corporate companies as members. So we span kind of the entire ecosystem, but also the entire European market. So we're slightly unique. And the way we work with our members is generally through committee work. So we set up kind of different committees depending on the industry topic or the industry area that we need to focus on. So for example, we're obviously going to talk a bit today about retail media. We have a retail media committee, and within that we have, the relevant kind of companies that work in retail media. So retail media networks, retailers, media agencies, technology companies, etc. So that tends to be how we work with our members, through committee work, to develop things like whether it's industry standards, whether it's education, whether it's guides, whether it's insights, etc. That's how we work.
And what's been your personal journey in IAB? Because you've been there for 12 years. Like, what type of roles have you done within the organization? Because we're very used to talking about people's career within corporate, but not so much in these associations. So curious to know.
Yeah, it's been an interesting role. So I started out, like I said, 12 years ago, and I kind of started when programmatic advertising was becoming kind of a thing. So, if you look back kind of 10, 12, 13 years, programmatic was still very nuanced, still very nascent. And essentially, we built kind of two core industry groups at that point in time at the start of my role within IAB Europe. One named the Programmatic Trading Committee and the other named the Brand Advertising Committee. And these were developed really to focus on the industry at the time. So programmatic trading, as I said, was starting to become a thing, and we did a lot of work around educating how programmatic works, how it works for different channels, whether it's video, whether it's mobile, etc. When it was the year of mobile for many years, so that was kind of the start of my career with IAB Europe, and then I did a few different roles within that as well. I supported those committees by developing different events and industry initiatives to build on top of. And then more recently, I've created the Retail Media Committee. So since about October 2022, so a couple of years now, I've been focused on building out the Retail Media Committee and workstream within IAB Europe.
And I imagine that with a subject matter as, let's call it as meaty as retail media, that there's obviously a lot of other things that let's say a lot of other groups beyond just the standard committee that are interested in that. Like, for example, I think you were mentioning to us before we started the episode that you've also started a group called Women in Retail Media. And could you tell us a little bit more about that as well, in addition to the work that you're doing through the official committee with IAB?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So the Women in Retail Media Collective, I think is a really good initiative, and it comes at a really good time. So it's been founded by two kind of really, really great ladies in the industry, Anna-Laura Zane and Emma Heltzlut, who both actually work at Pentaleap, and they've asked me and others to be one of their kind of founding members, which I'm really honoured to do. And essentially, it's a group to connect women within the retail media industry, empower women to help shape the future of this industry. I think there's something like 80% of retail purchasing decisions are actually made by women, yet we tend to be kind of underrepresented in, when it comes to things like leadership roles within the industry. So it's really there to help empower, connect, and drive, female leadership, specifically within retail media. I've seen similar initiatives like this pop up before. So, for example, there is a Women in Programmatic network, and it works so well. It has such good engagement, such good feedback, and it's a real force for good for the industry. And I imagine this is going to be a very, very similar thing. That's
awesome. A lot of our listeners obviously work in retail media or have something to say in retail media. Is this group aimed for people that are like really subject matter experts, or are you open also to people that are working as like in trade marketing or shopper marketing, even in sales and FMCG and e-commerce?
Yeah, no, I think it's open. It's really open. We really want to bring as many people together as possible.
Great. What's the best way for women that are listening to us that would be interested in learning more? Like, what's the best way for them to get involved?
So the actual collective, I think, is launching officially, I want to say next week.
Which will already be in the past when we launch this, by the way.
Okay. So the official collective has launched. So the best thing to do is head to the Women in Retail Media Collective website.
We can leave it in the show notes.
Yeah, you can leave it. It's wrmcollective.com and get in contact that way.
I like that it's a short URL. So for anyone that's listening, I do invite you to get involved, or you can also reach to Marie-Clare on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Sorry for the license, but I'm sure they can. But that's great, and we'll also be very excited to support you guys as much as we can. I don't know if it's ironic that FMCG Guys supports the Women in Retail Media Collective, but I think that we can do a lot of good together.
I think that is only going to be a good thing. So yes.
Yeah.
As much involvement and as support as possible would be great.
And going back to like your career over 12 years in the IAB, how have you seen marketing change since you started?
It's a really good question. I think there's a couple of kind of things I'd bring out here. Obviously, I could probably talk quite a lot, but I think the first thing is, I think marketing particularly, I'm looking at this mainly through a digital lens because that is kind of where I come from and my experience. But I think it's become more accountable, and I think marketers expect more outcome-driven metrics and kind of almost like instant reporting. So going back to programmatic, pre-programmatic, IO-based digital advertising buying, everything was very manual. Everyone was kind of used to having to wait for reporting, campaigns being reported on, etc. It was all kind of the norm, if you like. Then you had programmatic trading, and everything became automated, and there almost became this like expectation for everything to be instant and everything to be kind of reported back in real time. And that has become the case for a lot of things with programmatic trading, which is great. So I think one of the fundamental shifts has been that kind of accountability and that instantaneous, being able to report on. I think that's great because you can also, as a marketer, optimize your campaigns and optimize your budgets and, where you're spending. If you're spending on platform X and it's working really well, you might move some of your budget from a campaign that's not working so well, for example.
Yeah.
I think that's one fundamental shift. And I think there's lots of positives that come with that. And I think what we're seeing now in retail media is marketers kind of wanting that to be applied across retail media, which is a process and it's going to take time. And then I think the other thing is consumers have become more connected. However, there's a lot more fragmentation now across how, in terms of how consumers connect with media. So if you think back 10 years, maybe even less, consumers were probably looking at, they probably had one, maybe two TV subscriptions. They had a mobile phone, etc. But if you look at today, and I look at my own media consumption, I think I have 5 or 6 CTV, TV subscriptions.
Wow.
Plus I've got a mobile phone, plus I've got an iPad. I consume content and media kind of in such a fragmented way. Obviously, I don't, as a consumer, you don't think about that. But as a marketer trying to reach me in a kind of connected, harmonized way, it's a real challenge because no longer have you got, TV being the mass medium. So, that's the big budget item. And then you've got kind of these other, things that support that. You have to flip all that on its head and think, where is my consumer? First, who is my consumer? Where are they? How do I know? And how do I get to them? So it's a really difficult, it's a very exciting time. And like I said, there's more metrics and reporting and, more outcomes-based things coming out of that, but it's also very fragmented. And you see that kind of across the medium, but also within different media. So for example, if you look within retail media as a channel, that's got fragmentation. If you look within connected TV as a channel, there's lots of fragmentation going there, particularly if you're a marketer, across markets, looking at, advertising across markets and regions. Even, within programmatic, there's a certain amount of fragmentation there. So it becomes a real challenge, I think, to reach the consumer effectively. But if you can cut through, I think there's lots of opportunity there.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating about what you just shared is that, let's say the what of marketing in terms of understanding who your consumer is and where to best engage with them, that's pretty fundamental. And that's something that's been, kind of at the core of marketing for as long as marketing has been around. But the how that's done, because of all the fragmentation and the increasingly complex landscape that we as marketers are faced with, has changed dramatically. And to that point, you've mentioned retail media specifically a couple of times, and I think it probably begs a question for us to define what is retail media. Like, how do you define retail media, right? Because I think even on this call, we might even have 3 different definitions. So I'm curious to get your perspective on how you define it.
I love that question, because actually when I set up the retail media committee, like I said, a couple of years ago, one of the first things that we, in one of the first meetings we had was, right, we need to all get on the same page as to what retail media is. A bit like, I'm going to go back 10 years, programmatic. Everyone's like, we need to know what it is. What is it and what isn't it? So that's where we started, actually. And we came up with a definition that hopefully kind of encompasses the entire kind of retail media space, if you like. And we said that was advertising space, data, and anything kind of within a store that is owned by a retailer or a marketplace, which is then made available to brands or marketers for the execution of advertising campaigns. So we think that's quite different to trade marketing, which is, really there to shift product. This is for specific campaigns. And within that, you've got, we've developed a framework. Within that, you've got kind of the on-site opportunities, so anything kind of owned and operated on-site, the off-site opportunity, where it comes back to that point about data, where retail data might be used. And then again, anything within a store as well. And then in store, we've broken that down a bit more into terms of digital, print, connected shopping, etc. The different kind of opportunities, media opportunities that might exist within a store. So it's quite complex, but we hope that we've brought some clarity to it. And I think the definition will probably evolve somewhat over time, particularly as the divide between, as I said before, retail media and trade marketing becomes a bit more distinct.
Are there any other key definitions of emerging themes in marketing that you think are worth clarifying?
Aside from retail media, do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there's always lots of terms.
You probably have to do a dictionary.
Yeah, so we have actually got a glossary. So there's a whole retail media hub on the IAB website, and there is a glossary for retail media within that, which probably, we published it like 7-ish months ago, maybe even slightly more. It's probably already out of date and needs updating. This is the thing with our industry. This is the other thing I've learned over time. Everything's constantly evolving, constantly updating a bit, we're quite innovative. So I think that's something to bear in mind, is that, we publish these things, but we need to make sure we can iterate and remain current.
Yeah. So I was reading one of your recent reports, and one of the key pieces of feedback that illustrated was brands or advertisers' desire for standardization, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, given that is something that the ecosystem, or a good portion of the ecosystem, is asking for, what is IAB's role in helping to drive that for retail media?
I think we are, as a multi-stakeholder kind of pan-European association with, like I said, lots of different members at play, with a view of the entire European market, we are well positioned to bring everyone together and develop standards. Because I think when you develop standards, you have to bring people together and you have to bring people on a journey. So that's what we've tried to do. So we have already put out standards for digital or online retail media campaigns for both on and off-site. Going back to that definition, the on and off-site parts of that. And that covers both media and sales metrics for retail media campaigns. And so they were published back in April. And then we have published a document on in-store measurement standards as well, which is, it was out for public comment until the 1st of November, and we're now just refining that based on some of the feedback that we've had. We're moving into we've published these standards, and I think some of the feedback we've had, which is fair enough, is kind of like, so what? You've brought the industry together, you've developed, what we think that the metrics should be and how they should be measured, etc. Now what? So what we're trying to do now is certify retailers and retail media networks that meet those standards for digital to start with. We're not focused on in-store right now for certification, but so we've got a pilot certification scheme. A certification scheme in pilot phase right now. You can find out more on our website, but that's what we're trying to do: make the standards kind of applicable in market and mean something, because I think that's where they really come into play.
Nice. And another area that I think that you cover is education and market intelligence. And I know you've just published some insights around retail media, which obviously we'll leave in the show notes for anyone to read as they're listening or after listening. But from the findings from these reports, what type of stats can you share that you think are interesting, revealing about what's happening?
Yeah, we've recently published a couple of new pieces of research and insight. So in July, we published what we call our Attitudes to Retail Media report, which is a bit like a state of the nation for retail media. So what's driving growth, what's hindering growth, where are budgets coming from, how are people feeling about it, etc. And then the other new insights we've kind of more recently published back in October are the retail media in numbers, if you like, which are kind of growth rates and forecasts and current spending or advertising revenues, all put together by our chief economist, Daniel Knapp. And I think a couple of kind of key stats, obviously everyone can go and have a look at these at their leisure, but a couple of key stats that I think are interesting. The first one is that retail media advertising revenue in Europe grew by 22% in 2023, which compared to a total ad market growth of 6%. So I think it's fair to say there's a lot of growth. I'll come on to that in a minute. And then the other figure that I think is quite interesting to share is that we forecast that by 2028 it could reach 31 billion euros in terms of ad revenue in Europe. Now, if you compare that to total digital is currently around about 96. So it's fairly significant. I think the thing that we have to be really cautious of is these numbers are obviously show lots of potential, lots of opportunity, is how we get there and how we sustain that growth. Because we've talked a bit about standardization. That is the lack of standards and the fragmentation is going to hinder growth. And I think, obviously our role as the IAB is to help the market to thrive and to grow, going back to the original mission. So that's why we focus on standards here, because we see this as a core component of the growth of the future of digital advertising and marketing. So we focused in on here. I think technology has a role to play. Technology will help, as it has done with programmatic, will help kind of overcome some of that fragmentation. But I think, we have to, as an industry, come together and talk to each other. So, the buy side has to talk to the sell side and vice versa via industry associations like the IAB to make that figure a realisation. Because if you look at the Attitudes to Retail Media report, which, as I said, talks a bit more about kind of the factors behind those growth rates, they're actually, marketers say they're moving money from other channels into retail media, and they're not creating new budgets. There's not new money here, particularly from linear TV and particularly from performance marketing budgets. So there's a bit of a mix of budgets going on into retail media. So, we're not trying to grow new pots of budget. We're trying to make that money that they're moving from other marketing budgets meaningful and ensure that continues to happen. So I think it's just, obviously we put out these big numbers, we just need to give the context behind them and make sure that everyone's aware that there's work to be done as an industry to get us there, essentially.
Yeah, and one follow-up question of that. I don't know how much overview, but since you're IAB Europe and you have like different markets within your scope, I don't know if there's like a big stroke type of picture you could give us about like the different speeds of development in the European markets that you have top of mind.
Yeah, I think so. Within retail media, I think the kind of fastest growing markets tend to be the UK and Germany. So that's, that's kind of not that different to digital. Then the other real growth areas that we're seeing are the Southern European markets. So like Spain, Portugal, etc., are seeing lots of growth here. So that's quite interesting too. So it does definitely vary by market, but I think generally across the board, we're seeing more growth here. And generally the Central and European markets will catch up as time goes on.
Yeah, and if I could just give a quick shout out. Those reports both include a great infographic at the end. So for those of you who are wanting to get more interesting stats, definitely check out those two reports on the IAB site, and we'll put a link on the show notes. So I was curious to get your perspective, given all the work that you've done in regards to things like standardization and really just trying to define what this space we call retail media starts to look like. From your perspective, what do you think FMCG companies should prioritize when it comes to their retail media? I wouldn't even say investment, but just general strategy.
Mm.
And also maybe, since you mentioned that you want them to move the budget in the right way to retail media, why should they even invest in retail media in the first place?
So I think there's a couple of things. I think, I'm going to go back to the attitudes to retail media survey, because that gives me some really good kind of pointers in terms of why people are prioritizing, brands are prioritizing retail media. One of them tends to be, going back to my point about the fragmentation generally across marketing and reaching consumers. I think one of them, reaching your consumer, so cutting through and reaching your consumer, particularly right now, within retail media at the point of sale, so driving that sale through to conversion, I think is really key. And I think going back to the kind of fundamental of marketing and advertising, it's to sell product or services, make a difference in your brand, in terms of brand equity or brand perception, etc. So I think they're quite key. Getting your brand, getting your product right in front of the consumer when they're about to, when they're in the the purchasing mindset is really valuable. I think the other thing is that, coming back to the data and the need to kind of have all of these insights and all of this data, reaching those shoppers at the point of sale, but also having that kind of attribution loop and being able to see, did Marie-Clare see my Diageo ad, Efrain, on the Tesco.com website? Yes, she did. And actually I can see from, the purchases she's made and the loyalty card data we have, etc., that she's also looked at other similar products, but then gone on to make that purchase. I think that is kind of comes down to the core of advertising and what what everyone's trying to achieve here. So I think that's quite exciting. And I think that's probably where this comes down to, is being able to really reach your consumer, understand what they bought and how often they bought it, etc., and all those additional things that come with it. So yeah, I think that's probably why it is and hopefully should continue to be priority.
So just a follow-up on that. One of the other things from the study that you referenced talked about that, even though, like you said, it's a very compelling business case as to why you should be moving some of your investment into retail media, there's still a significant portion of the, let's call it the advertiser population, that has been hesitant to invest in retail media. What would you say, from your perspective, might be a good way to get started for those individuals who maybe, this is still kind of a new thing and they're still thinking more along the lines of that linear TV or above the line media from an investment standpoint?
I think, well, one thing I would say, first thing to do, read the IAB 101 Guide to Retail Media, because that's a really good starting point in terms of understanding what is it, what are the options available to me in terms of the types of ads, types of measurement metrics I might be able to get, etc. Read that. Speak to some retail partners and some media network partners, and get an idea of what can be done and how, etc. My advice would be, I think, try and start steady. Don't try and run before you can walk. I think the other thing just to mention is there's so many different retail media networks popping up in Europe. I think we counted last, it was like 130 something. So don't try and, think, oh, I've got to be across 138 retail media networks. Start with look at where you're already selling your product. Where are your top tier? What are your kind of top tier retailers, etc. And probably start there and see, and ask them what types of insights and what types of reporting, etc. you're going to get, and whether that's valuable would be my advice.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, if a brand that's listening to us or a retailer is interested in learning more about the IAB, like what are the ways that you typically partner with brands and retailers?
So generally through membership. So most of the companies we engage with tend to be our members, or at least a member of one of our national IAB federations. So best thing to do is get in contact with me and talk to me and discuss how you can get involved. Most retailers and retail media networks we're working with at the moment bring something to the table and have something to add, which is really great. So we get a diverse kind of range of opinions when we're developing things like standards. We don't just have grocery retailers. We have a beauty retailer and some others as well. So come and talk to me and get involved, because I think, as I said before, we need to work as an industry to make that 31 billion figure a reality.
Absolutely. And my sense is that, some people may already be working, some companies, I should say, may already be members. So, check it out. And if you aren't, then definitely connect with Marie-Clare. So Marie-Clare, this has been great. And I have a ton of questions that I will ask you offline specific to what I would love to know, but definitely would encourage everybody to go check out those 2 reports on the IAB website as a great starting point. We have one last question, and this is a question that we ask all of our guests. And this is a question that requires you to kind of go back in time, put yourself in a time machine, and go back in time to when you were first starting your career. And if you could give your younger self, one piece of advice at that moment in time, what would it be?
I love this question. So I think I started my career in a very different industry before I moved into kind of advertising and marketing. I actually did a kind of business development and marketing role within a building construction company. So I used to get very hung up because there are kind of like a lot of strict rules and things around how you can construct things. I won't go into the details, but I used to get very hung up on perfection. So my first role kind of shaped me into believing everything should be perfection. I've come to learn through working, in this industry and doing the job I do now, that actually most things are a process. Not everything goes as you kind of plan. And so I've had to learn to embrace that. And I think my advice to my younger self would be, not everything is perfection. And actually often you grow or you learn the most when you step out of your comfort zone and try not to always, focus up, get hung up on perfection. So I guess in summary is every experience, whether it's good, bad or or indifferent is a valuable lesson, but don't get hung up on perfection too much.
Yeah, and
Be patient.
I can tell you, yeah, there's very few professions where you need perfection. I think that like when you're a doctor, for example, you have to aim for perfection, for example. And when you're a builder as well, because I just got I bought an apartment and I got it redone. And now there's all these problems there. So I can see that like pragmatism doesn't necessarily work when you're redoing a house. So you need to strive for perfection, but that's not the reality of like most industry jobs, right?
Exactly. And also when I work in this job, which is very different, which is bringing together so many different vast perspectives from across a broad spectrum of stakeholders, getting to perfection is near on impossible. Yep. So we have to focus for what's good and what does good look like and what's going to work, but not necessarily perfection right now, and be patient with that process.
Yeah, you have to look for optimums and compromises, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's almost like you've seen in the day-to-day of my day-to-day job, to be fair with that.
Stakeholder management, we all have a fair bit of it. So Marie-Clare, Efrain and I are going to try as best as we can to draw some conclusions from this conversation. Efrain, can you define retail media now?
Well, I think I can certainly repeat what Marie-Clare has taught us, right? Which is advertising space, data, and anything in store or in a marketplace that's made available to a brand in some way, shape, or form to activate. And I think that's pretty encompassing, and it's meaty enough that I think it captures most of what we tend to think of. But I'm a big fan of process, so I think having a standard definition is definitely a plus.
What did you think of the changes in marketing, Efrain? Because we talked about consumers being more connected and fragmented into different mediums, but also marketing being more accountable and more performance-driven metrics. I was thinking, do you think that as somebody that's worked with brands, that can hinder or compromise long-term brand building, or?
I think if you become singularly focused on being performance marketing driven, it can. I would say that like most things in life, it's very rarely black or white. There's always, those are the two ends of the spectrum, and the answer typically lies somewhere in between. So I think, my experience at least has been that the brands who are doing this well are looking at something like retail media and seeing it from the perspective of both a performance driver, but also an opportunity to build their brand as well, right? So it can drive both brand salience and purchase conversion. I think the brands who are getting this right are thinking about it in that way.
Got it. No, makes sense. What else? Any other key conclusions from the conversation?
To me, I really loved, and I probably put you a little bit on the spot, Marie-Clare, when I asked you, how do you tell somebody to get started in something as complex as this? But I loved how you distilled it down into, those three fundamental things, which is one, get educated on it. So use the resources like what's available on IAB to building your brain around what the retail media opportunity could be. Talking to retail partners and not trying to boil the ocean, but really focusing on the ones where you're already actively selling as a great place to start. And then taking the approach of, crawl, walk, then run. So, maybe don't think that you have to, go from 0 to 100, but think about how you can kind of build up along the way. To me, I think that's sound advice, not just for retail media, but for anything. But I think, definitely very applicable when it comes to something like retail media, for sure.
Totally. And what about the standardization?
Well, I told you, I love process. I started my career in process consulting. So I love the discussion around standardization, and I'm definitely in that camp. So I think if I had filled out if I had been one of the people in that survey, Marie-Clare, I would have been one of the folks that said, we definitely need standardization. And I've been saying for quite some time that this feels like the time for measurement and for being able to kind of think about measurement in a more standardized, in some ways simplistic sort of way. So I'm definitely very keen to spend a little bit more time in the work that you all have published around in-store measurement, and would encourage other folks listening in to do the same.
Yeah, I think that I would recommend also to go back to hear about some of the key stats about like retail media advertising revenue growing by 22% in 2023, could reach 31 billion. So that will be interesting. And total digital could be around 96 billion. So it will be an interesting evolution as well. So yeah, and I thought last thing I thought like interesting to know, like why should FMCG companies shift their budgets to retail media? Because you're getting the product in front of the consumer when they're actually purchasing, and that closed attribution loop, which I think is the key reason why FMCGs have bought into retail media as a start, to get that data that's very valuable.
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that kind of speaks to what we said at the beginning, which is that although the way of marketing or how we do marketing has evolved significantly, the core fundamental of like being where your consumer is and being able to engage them at the right moments is what it's all about, right? And it's no different than the way we thought about other forms of marketing activation. This just happens to be one that can do that in a very effective sort of way, and that you can do that closed loop attribution that Marie-Clare mentioned.
So Marie-Clare, I hope we summarized this well enough. Actually, a last thing would be to give another shout out to the Women in Retail Media Collective, which you just launched, and I think that could be something really exciting for people, the women that are listening to us, to get involved in.
Yeah, do. And yeah, your summary is perfect. I couldn't have summed it up better. But yeah, I think lean in, get involved, and certainly, look at the Women in Retail Media Collective as well as a really new, nice industry initiative.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Marie-Clare, for joining us. Thanks to our audience as well for tuning in to this 200 and something, I'm not sure about the number yet, episode of the FMCG Guys. And we'll see you in the next episode every Wednesday and every Saturday. Have a great day.
Thank you.